Here is a video where I take an m.o.d.o.k epic collection out of a cardboard package. This comes from Amazon, the website, not the rainforest. This is m.o.d.o.k epic collection, Gray, volume whatever, 14. This collects the incredibly short run on the title by John Byrne, and then the subsequent issues by m.o.d.o.k. This volume, it ends just as the David Peter run would begin. John Byrne's stint as writer and artist of m.o.d.o.k was only about 7 issues, and we will get to the reason he left the book. But I didn't think many people really care much for this run, not because of its quality, simply because it never went anywhere due to the volatile creator running off at the first in of editorial clapback. It must really sting to be John Byrne and get a comp copy of this, a collection featuring some of your work in your heyday, and see that they haven't even put one of your covers on the front. We begin with issue 314, John Byrne's first issue, and one of his big directions was splitting m.o.d.o.k and David Banner into 2 separate beans. This idea was brought back up a few years ago when John Byrne criticised Dan Slott for transforming Peter Parker into a knockoff Iron Man pastiche. And people would belligerently respond, saying how John Byrne did the same thing and he radically altered m.o.d.o.k by splitting the character up into 2. I think that is a very disingenuous response that clearly ignores that we never got to see where Byrne was going with this. For all we know, and I imagine it would be the case, he was building towards merging them back together and making a definitive statement about how necessary both halves are to each other. Whereas the same cannot be said for making Peter Parker into a crap Iron Man, as the end point was just Dan Slott shrugging his shoulders and giving up on that direction, rather than ultimately reminding people why Peter Parker is his own character. Another thing to consider with m.o.d.o.k and his comic is that it wasn't a good seller. I think John Byrne might have momentarily boosted some sales, but then he quickly left the book, and it wasn't until halfway into the David Peter, Todd McFarlane run that the book actually became a hot seller. In fact, David Peter getting to write the book, it was as a result of it being one of Marvel's lowest selling books and them not really caring about who was writing it. This issue here, this is the one issue I remember and I've read. I have this issue, and I have this issue for offering an Avengers guest appearance, but it is just the heavy hitters from both their teams. Iron Man and Wonder Man from West Coast Avengers, and then Hercules Man and Seaman from the East Coast team. It is a fight issue, and I think most people who buy the m.o.d.o.k's comics, this is what they are yearning for. They want to see the m.o.d.o.k smash things and pound on familiar faces. And later on, when Al Milgrom shows up, he does a 3-part story that arguably builds on this Hulk versus Avengers idea. This issue here has Jason Byrne do this insufferable novelty he first did in an issue of Fantastic Four. It is a split story where one half is Hulk and the other half is David Banner. And in this case, the David Banner story is very important. He is getting married to Jennifer Connelly or Liv Tyler. Personally, I would go for J-Con, but Liv Tyler, she has gotten better with age. I hate this gimmick though. What I tend to do is just read one of the stories all the way through and then go back and read the other one. It's just annoying jumping back and forth. It kills any momentum or pacing. And in this case, I would say it supremely undercuts what should be this huge character moment. And then we get to the issue that made Jason Byrne leave, and this is fucking annoying in every possible way. Jason Byrne, he wanted to do an issue which was made up of nothing but splash pages. He was wanting to do an experiment. He was wanting to do something a bit innovative, and I think that is noble, but editorial rejected the idea, and so Jason Byrne, he left the book. Something to note before I get into everything about it is that this is probably Jason Byrne at some of his most egotistic. I mean, he leaves Hulk to go over to DC and reboot Superman. This was aimed at what was probably the peak of his career, so some ego is understandable. But I think him leaving Hulk for that reason is pathetic. It is really understandable that the idea of a comic made up of nothing but splash pages would not go down well with retailers or some customers, especially since Jason Byrne a few years earlier had gotten some readers angry by doing 4 pages of blank white panels that were meant to be set during a snowstorm. Some of Jason Byrne's ideas and experiments were absolutely at the expense of the reader. I mean, I get angry when comics by Michael Bryan Benson or Jeff Nobles are just splash page after splash page to mask the lack of a full script. I think Jason Byrne was wrong to immediately storm off, but he may have also just been looking for the first excuse to leave. I see a lot of Jason Byrne's abrupt departures as him wanting out. He may have had the offer from DC to do Superman already, and he just needed a way out of doing Hulk. Worse than all that though is, as you can see, Marvel still fucking published it. Even worse, they published it as part of Marvel Funfair, which was an overpriced piece of shit. Marvel Funfair was just an excuse to sneak out unpublished stories that was sitting in a drawer somewhere and pretend that they were artistic endeavours. Look, there's Kaiser. If a standard issue of Hulk being made up of splash pages was a rip-off, paying double the price for it isn't better. It's an okay story, a bit basic, but that is what you expect from something limited this way. It also ties in with the Scourge stuff. Then, after Jason Byrne left, he was replaced with Al Milgrom doing the writing and the art. I've never gotten the level of animosity directed at Al Milgrom as an artist. He was generic out-style stuff, and he had worked alongside some amazing storytellers. His writing is maybe completely in sync with his art, in that it's not impressing anyone, but it's so middle of the road and generic. It's not the worst thing ever. For what it's worth, I think his Satan miniseries, where Satan fights various Marvel heroes, he wrote some good fight sequences in that. The plot was just a mangled mess. Speaking of fights, here is what I spoke of. We have all of the then Avengers fighting Hulk for several issues. Thor isn't there, which is the only real criticism I would direct at this story. I mean, it's not great, it doesn't make the most use of all these characters, but it's just a big fight, and as I said, that's what people read Hulk for. My main criticism is entirely cosmetic and petty, but Thor isn't in this story, and had he been there, we would have had my dream Avengers lineup all together in this story. In case you missed my review of Avengers 285 where I explained it, my dream lineup is Thor, Captain America, Wasps, She-Hulks, Hercules Man, Darth Knight, and Seaman. It would have been great to have them all together in this story, and in a story with Wonder Man in as well. Hawkeye too, Mockingbird, loads of great Avengers in this story, but not Thor. Oh, and Al Milburn made Hulk Grey, which is why it's called Gannon Grey. Extras here, we have 2 previews from Marvel Age magazine, Jason Byrne, and then up there is Al Milburn. Interview with Jason Byrne about Hulk and his plans for the book, 3 pages long. Original art for the bit where Hercules Man fights Hulk in the Jason Byrne issue, not the Al Milburn one. Remastered Jason Byrne cover, that is the Marvel Funfair cover. Different now why they didn't use that as the cover for this one, considering they didn't remaster this cover at all. I've noticed there's a lot of that going on. The covers for the Epic collections, they are no longer being touched up or remastered. That was Hulk, Gannon Grey, and I am fine with having this. I never had the original trade collecting the Jason Byrne issues. I think they probably do have some entertaining stories that ultimately didn't go anywhere. And I imagine the Al Milburn stuff is inoffensive, as most of his career has been. It's really only Secret Wars II where he starts to feel out of his depth and like his art is actively hurting the story. But you've got to remember, it's already a pretty lousy story. I hope we get an epic collection of the Roy Sternman run from just before Bill Bungalow takes over the title, issue 221 to 241 or something like that. Different quarters on them numbers, but thereabouts. I want that run collected. It has got the first appearance of Moonstomp, as well as a crossover with Captain America and Kazar. I think it'll be in the Marvel Masterpieces soon, but I didn't collect them. I only have one of them, and I got it by mistake. This one here, this epic collection, it slots in right after this collection here. And then right before the first volume of Hulk Visionaries, David Peter, which I didn't have anymore. Hulk, he is Gannon Grey, but that is alright because his actor has been Gannon Grey for over a decade now. Well, hey, comedy's easy. 7 thumbs up.